Tom Hunt.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. This is the second adjournment debate that I've held since being elected as a Member of Parliament for Ipswich. First time I raised the issue of orthopaedic services at Ipswich Hospital. This time I raised probably the number one transport issue that faces our town and is of great importance to my constituents. I hope that this time round we can get a more positive outcome than we did after the first adjournment debate. So the Orwell Bridge, constructed between 1979 and 1982, it opened in December 1982. Architecturally, a magnificent construction, iconic through the area, and of great significance and importance. But the problem with the Orwell Bridge has been the number of closures that have taken place, particularly since 2013. And I remember vividly when I was actually shown around the former Odeon Cinema in Ipswich, now the home of Hope Church. And I was guided up to a roof, and it was quite a bleak winter's day, and it was quite windy. And I went to the top of the roof, and I thought, isn't that a remarkable view of the Orwell Bridge? And then all of a sudden, this wonderful view turned to concern, as we thought, does this mean that the bridge needs to close because it's windy? And this is, since 2013, we've seen the Orwell Bridge close approximately 20 times. Earlier today, I spoke to Ipswich Central, our local business improvement district, and they feel as though each day's closure costs the local economy around £1 million. Over 6,000 of my constituents are either, approximately 6,000 of my constituents are either directly or indirectly employed by the Port of Felixstowe, which, as the Minister will know, is the country's busiest and most significant sea container port. Many of them work in businesses, many of them run their own businesses to do with distribution, logistics, and they depend upon the Orwell Bridge being open to survive and to thrive. So that is the problem that we have here today, that so often during the winter period, particularly between the period of November to March, but January, February being the worst 2 months, we've seen the bridge close. And the reality is that when the bridge closes, our town grinds to a halt. All of the local traffic, whether it's a mum waking up in the morning to take her kids to school at the other side of town, whether it's somebody looking to get to work the other side of town, whether it's somebody wanting to get to a GP appointment, a dental appointment, or whether it's our very important freight traffic that needs to get across the bridge, instead goes through the town centre. And the economic impact of this, as well as disruption in the day-to-day lives of my constituents, should not be underestimated. Having spoken to many constituents who have lived with this issue for many years, it seems as though really it's only been the last 5 to 6 years that the closures of the Orwell Bridge have been a significant issue. I imagine probably because of changing safety regulations, which of course is something that we need to take into account and take very seriously. And I'm not being cavalier here. Clearly, if there are concerns about traffic going across the Orwell Bridge when there's high winds, that's something that should be taken into consideration. But it is rather frustrating that it took until autumn 2018 for any serious attempt to be made to look into the devastating impact that bridge closures have been having on the local economy and the lives of many of my constituents. And this is where I turn to the national impact. Yes, this is a local issue. Bridge closures impact my constituency, they impact businesses in my constituency and my constituents. But also, the Minister will be acutely aware of the importance of the port and the local infrastructure that serves the port to the national economy. And that includes the north of England. Many of the exporters, importers rely upon goods coming into the port at Felixstowe and then travelling freely and efficiently to where they need to be. And I think at a time where our local economy is looking to recover from the impact of COVID-19 and the time that we leave the European Union and look to have a positive future when we can actually hopefully increase the activity at the Port of Felixstowe. And I'll talk on another occasion about my support for the idea of the Port of Felixstowe becoming a free port in connection with the port in Harwich and the huge economic potential of the area and how it can be transformed by that free port. However, I will not be distracted by that very important issue. But as we look at look to recover from COVID. And as we look to winter months ahead, what we do, the last thing we need is another winter dominated by closures of a bridge. We do not want that. We believe that wouldn't be the case. But right now, we are looking at another winter of experiencing more bridge closures. Highways England are responsible for managing and maintaining Orwell Bridge. And my view is they've taken far too long to take this issue seriously, and they haven't treated it with the urgency required. It was autumn 2018 that they commissioned an aerodynamic study to look into this issue and to come up with recommendations about what might be done to prevent the Orwell Bridge closing when the wind speeds are over 50 miles an hour. This report was meant to take 9 months, and it took 15 months. There is no explanation for why it took 15 months. There is no sense of urgency. But I remember sitting down with Highways England about a month after I was elected in January in Portcullis House, and I was promised that a new 40-mile-an-hour speed limit would be in place on the bridge before winter 2020-2021. And I was looked in the eye and I was said that your constituents will not have to experience another winter period with these closures. Yet, here we are in December, the speed limit hasn't been introduced, and we're expecting it not to be introduced until the end of March, i.e. the end of the winter period and not the start. So the reality is that my constituents are looking at another winter with more bridge closures, more disruption and more damage to the local economy at exactly the point where we really don't need that added challenge. So when I was promised in January 2020 that these measures would be in place ahead of this winter, I understandably doubted whether this would be the case after the delay with the production of the aerodynamics report. I was informed in the summer that they had to carry out some wind tunnel validation work to make sure that if they introduced the 40-mile-an-hour speed limit on the bridge, then it would be safe for traffic still to go across the bridge. And they had to work with City University and use their wind tunnel to complete this validation work. I was told that the university had closed the wind tunnel. So I wrote to the Vice-Chancellor of the university and I said, will you reopen the wind tunnel so that this work can go ahead? And the wind tunnel reopened. But I was actually explained, they actually explained to me, the City University, that actually the delay wasn't caused by a decision not to reopen the wind tunnel, but the delay in Highways England actually signing the agreement for this work to be carried out. Alas, the tunnel was reopened, the work continued, and I raised it in this place at Transport Questions with the Secretary of State for Transport, who said he was expecting the wind tunnel validation work to be on his desk at the end of September. It wasn't on his desk at the end of September. It was delayed, just like everything else that Highways England have been involved in relation to this vitally important issue. So why do I stand here today, Mr. Deputy Speaker? I stand here today to ask the government to stress to Highways England the huge importance of resolving this issue as soon as possible and introducing the new speed limit so that the bridge can stay open during periods of high winds, so that our economy can keep moving and the lives of my constituents is not disrupted to the extent that it has been time and time again. So 2 weeks ago I had the privilege of meeting with the Roads Minister, Baroness Veer, who will be communicating with Highways England as well, but I would urge the Minister to add his voice to that clarion call to get moving, because the reality is there's a big difference between the start of the winter period and the end, because the reality is that my constituents are looking at another winter period of potentially multiple closures. But we are where we are, and one way or another this situation will be sorted, and it will be sorted in the not-too-distant future. But it could make a big difference about whether if that speed limit could be introduced at the end of January, early February, it could make all the difference. It might seem like it's only a couple of months, but it could be the difference between my constituents having to experience 2-3 extra bridge closures. It's difficult for me to really... I bang on about this bridge quite a lot. And in fact, a couple of my colleagues actually know me for this bridge. And I published a video recently on social media, quite a dramatic video with music in the background and a bridge behind me, on a windy day, might I add, and a wet day. But I'd say that I did a survey over the summer, and I knew that the Orwell Bridge was the #1 transport issue facing the town that I have the honour of representing. but I was slightly struck by the survey responses that I got. I did a survey in Ravenswood. New development, one of the areas most impacted by bridge closures. 96% of the people who responded to the survey, 96% out of about 1,000, said that this severely impacted their lives when the bridge closes. 80% in Chantry for another survey. And what many of my constituents find most frustrating is the lack of accountability and the fact that they feel as though ultimately Highways England is a bureaucratic, distant organisation that doesn't answer to anyone and frankly doesn't care, sometimes it feels, when the bridge closes. And perhaps that would explain the lack of urgency and the lack of importance that they've attached to this. Because ultimately, when we add together the 6-month delay with the aerodynamics report, and we add to that the 5-month delay in implementing the report's recommendations, we're looking at a delay of about a year. And what is the cost to UK PLC and to the local economy that I represent when we take into account that delay? Because the sad reality is, Mr Deputy Speaker, that in the past when that bridge is closed, and it's estimated that each day of closure costs the local economy £1 million a day, it isn't Highways England who pays the price for bad performance. It's been my constituents who have paid the price for their broken promises and bad performance, and it's been local businesses that have paid the price for their broken promises and bad performance. So, Mr Deputy Speaker, at this particular moment in time, I would urge the government to work with me to challenge Highways England, challenge them, ask them to be more ambitious, and urge them to approach with the urgency required to look to do better than the end of March. Because every week, every month can make a difference, and we need the new speed limit in place so we can turn our backs on the constant closures of the Orwell Bridge. Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I'm grateful to my honourable friend, the member for Ipswich, for securing this important debate. The Minister for Roads is unable to take part in the debate, and therefore it's my pleasure to respond on behalf of the Government. This is an issue which my honourable friend has raised with the Minister for Roads directly, and one with which I know he is actively engaged, in particular through his involvement with the Ipswich Transportation Task Force. The issue of closures of the Orwell Bridge in my honourable friend's constituency is not new and has been causing concern for his constituents now for several years. As my honourable friend pointed out in his speech, there have been 20 closures of this critical piece of infrastructure since 2013, with the average time the bridge has been closed being 4 to 5 hours. However, on several instances, the closures have been well in excess of that average. These closures can and do cause havoc in the surrounding Ipswich roads, and this government has, through Highways England, been pressing for the situation to be resolved. My honourable friend will be well aware of the work that has been undertaken by Highways England in recent months, and I'm pleased to say that progress is being made to change the speed restrictions on the bridge. This will allow the bridge to remain open in winds which would ordinarily have meant it would shut. The work that Highways England has done, despite the difficulties of 2020, has meant that this issue, while still a problem today, is one that we expect to see improve significantly in the very near future. I'm aware that this has not been the swift, smooth ride that either Highways England or my honourable friend expected when the process began. The closure of City University's wind tunnel in response to the COVID outbreak and the initial lockdown meant that there was an extension to the expected timetable. I acknowledge my honourable friend's concern that he will not see the speed restrictions implemented until early in the new year, having expected to see them in place for the winter season. Nevertheless, I am pleased that he was able to have a constructive meeting with the Roads Minister and Highways England, and I'm equally pleased that Highways England does expect to be ready to introduce the new speed limits as soon as possible in 2021. Highways England has always ensured that safety has remained, as my honourable friend would agree it should, at the forefront of its work. It has engaged with a range of stakeholders, including the Port of Felixstowe, the Met Office and Suffolk County Council. These engagements have helped improve its forecasting for when the bridge will be closed, as well as its communications with residents and businesses when a decision to close the bridge is being considered. Highways England has also made significant efforts to improve the diversion signage in the area. As well as this, Highways England has also worked with academics to model options that would allow the bridge to remain open in higher winds than is currently the case. My honourable friend will be aware that Highways England is now engaged in taking forward the option to reduce speed limits from 60 miles per hour to 40 miles per hour for all vehicles using the bridge. In doing so, there are a number of steps it needs to take. First is the publication of the Permanent Traffic Regulation Order, which I'm pleased to say was published on the 13th of November and will close in mid-December. This is a key part of the process in ensuring that all those affected by the change to the speed limit will have had a chance to comment. Following the closure of the Permanent Traffic Regulation Order, which Highways England does not expect to be contested, will be the delivery and installation of the new signs. Installation of the signs is a significant engineering undertaking. The weight and the size of the signs is a significant factor to consider. They cannot compromise the structural integrity of what is a complex 40-year-old structure, and they also need to be able to withstand the weather conditions experienced on the bridge. Nevertheless, as my honourable friend will be aware, this is an undertaking that Highways England is well prepared for. It expects, once design details and preparation works are complete, and for the signs to be delivered and that installation will take place in January. Last, it is an essential step of focusing on speed enforcement. There is no use having a speed limit if it is unenforceable, and Highways England has been closely engaged with the local police force to ensure that the right cameras are in place to enforce the new speed limit. My honourable friend will be aware that these will be a new set of average speed cameras on the bridge. What this means for my honourable friend and his constituents is that the closures that have blighted the Orwell Bridge and caused gridlock on the route and around Ipswich will be significantly reduced. Indeed, I am pleased to say that as a result of its work, Highways England expects to reduce the number of closures by as much as 80%. Let me say this, the work of Highways England, the work that Highways England has done has been instrumental in getting us to a point where it will be possible to keep the Orwell Bridge open in higher winds than has been the case in the past. The 20 closures since 2013 have been a real problem for the local community, as my honourable friend explained, causing gridlock on surrounding roads. So I'm pleased that the recent publication of the Permanent Traffic Regulation Order signals that an end is in sight. Mr. Deputy Speaker, none of this would have been possible without the tireless campaigning of my honourable friend, the member for Ipswich, who has been absolutely relentless in campaigning on this issue. More work is yet to be done. However, with the design and the preparation works, as well as the delivery of the signs expected in January, I am confident that my honourable friend and his constituents will rapidly see a huge reduction in the number of times the Orwell Bridge is closed to traffic in the future. Thank you.